Thank you for joining the Once Changing the World, India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. Today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Gunnar Newquist, who's a neuroscientist who has developed a unified learning theory of the brain. He's the founder, product manager, and former research scientist specializing in hardware and software applications across entertainment and autonomous technologies. He's the co-author of Artificial General Intelligence, A Revolution Beyond Deep Learning and the Human Brain. He's a strategic advisor at ORBAI, a startup that is developing artificial general intelligence that works like the human brain. So Gunnar, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. The topic of the day is going to be artificial general intelligence. So I think it'll be great if you can, set the audience and explain and define your perspective, or what do you think artificial general intelligence is?
Yeah, I take more of a broad definition of artificial general intelligence, I guess. It's the ability to learn anything. And I think the learning part is really the important part of it, because you're not necessarily benchmarking specifically against humans. You're benchmarking the ability to be flexible and the ability to gain understanding of new information, not just taking in data and spitting out analytics about it, right? So it's about learning on the fly and being able to deal with new situations. That's general intelligence to me.
Thank you, Gunnar, for giving your explanation of what you think artificial general intelligence is. And a machine, something that kind of learns on the fly, and it's got the understanding of the world. But do you think that the LLMs models are kind of doing something closer or similar to what you just kind of mentioned? Because these LLM models started with just being trained on the internet data, the text data, but these multimodal models now have got the capabilities of not just learning from the text which is available on the internet, but also, other forms of data such as visual data, coding data, and other, layers of this data. And there is something which is magical, which is happening, because these prompts are spewing out, not just, text, it's inferring like these awesome answers with these insights. These prompts are creating text to music, text to code, text to video. So do you think that we are kind of coming closer to what you kind of just defined as artificial general intelligence?
Well, unfortunately, it's not as general as advertised. So that's the main point there, is they do statistical analysis, essentially, of every piece of data that they bring in. And so any output that they spit out is some relic of what was trained. So you train on basically all of human knowledge that's on the internet. And then there's just so much data there that they can spit out reasonable approximations of what a human would say in specific situations. But if you go outside of those boundaries very far at all, then you see the problem that they're not actually understanding the underlying words that are being said, the meaning behind them, and they're not doing logic or any kind of higher level cognition that allows them to then solve new problems. So, an example would be math. They might be able to repeat small, addition, subtraction, multiplication problems, but then you give them a longer number and suddenly they fail entirely.
I think that's fair enough. So, Gunnar, you're also the co-author of Artificial General Intelligence, A Revolution Beyond Deep Learning and the Human Brain. Could you kind of give a brief overview on the book?
Yeah, so that was basically an idea of what is artificial intelligence today, and what's the difference between that and what we actually want with artificial general intelligence. So there's kind of a comparison about the what we call narrow AI approaches of deep learning, large language models, things like that. And then contrast that to something like a human brain that has capabilities that allow you to thrive in new situations. And what are those capabilities of the brain? And then at the end, here's some possible applications of an artificial general intelligence system. So it's a compare and contrast between today's tech, a human brain, and then the tech we would actually want to build to enable a new revolution in general intelligence.
Would love to kind of dig deeper into your book, The Artificial General Intelligence, and also the applications of what artificial general intelligence could be. But I want to dig in more into these LLMs and get your thoughts on, what these top AI scientists, claim, because obviously there's two different camps. There's one camp which kind of thinks that, the LLMs is the approach towards, maybe go building up these artificial general intelligent machines, and the other camp, which is the neuroscientist camps, which they thinks that the brain inspired approach is the only way, because we humans don't have similar learning patterns like LLMs, because the LLMs take a large amount of data. We humans or children, child when we're growing up, even with a couple of images, we understand what a cat is, because or even our current the best learning models at this point in time has to be fed a humongous amount of data to kind of understand or infer what a cat is. So I want to get your thoughts on these LLM models, because there are people such as Ilya Sutskever, who just kind of left OpenAI. He had tweeted a long time back that these LLMs are slightly conscious, and there was like a huge debate on Twitter about it. And then recently, these ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, there was Amazon and OpenAI. They wrote a paper called Sparks of AGI. So what are your thoughts on this LLMs having emergent properties? And yes, the consciousness debate is obviously a little bit too woo-woo, but I would love to get your thoughts on at least the emergent properties of these large language models, because somewhere the underneath the hood, because the AI what's doing, not everybody kind of understands that. And how a child grows up. They say that the first maybe like a couple of weeks, the child is not even conscious, it's just taking in all these information. And suddenly, maybe like after a couple of months, when it's taking in all the data of its surrounding, its mother and father, it starts kind of understanding those sensory informations gets concrete, and then you kind of start understanding your world, and that's when kind of consciousness kicks in. Is there like something similar going on with these LLM models, which is basically, like you said, data in, data out? What are your thoughts on that?
There's been some other research that shows that most of that is actually more of the same tricks that con artists use. So people are easily fooled into thinking something's conscious. Like there's examples going back clear to the beginning of computers, where the psychotherapist behavior tree, there was a program written to act like a psychoanalysis, and it just put out these very simple questions when somebody would interface with it. And people thought this computer was a better psychotherapist than a human psychotherapist in some cases. And the thing was, there was no intelligence at all. There was only a behavior tree behind it. And so some of it is a little bit of, I guess, playing upon humans' want of finding intelligence in things. And that I will give it some credit. There is some creativity going on there, or maybe randomness that gets generated. But when you look at it closely, you see most of it is actually either directly replicating something in its database, or just slightly altering something that it had in its database, which is still, in some people's minds, plagiarism. So the problem here is that the artists that have put all of their work into this AI model, not even intentionally, somebody scraped the data from their work, they're not getting compensated for the work that gets spit out from the AI model that looks intelligent and creative, but the vast majority of it was coming from a human mind previously, and the AI is just pushing out at the right time this very similar prose or very similar artistic work, such as images. So the problem I have with it is, I guess, that underlying all this was human intelligence in the first place, and those people aren't getting compensated for that which then appears in the AI model.
Right. So I'm a creative person. So I've been into the music industry for the longest time. When we speak about plagiarism, I mean, it's a little weird because, I mean, through history, if you go to see that we as humans, whatever we've done is based on some kind of an inspired, we are inspired by something, and then you kind of create. Yes, obviously, I mean, we humans have our own thinking or brain, and we've got a capability to kind of do something from complete first principles thinking that I completely see lacking over there. But that other side of the world, because, if you go anywhere which is completely mainstream, the audience are looking for what's already been done, maybe repackaged in a new way. So that entire plagiarism thing is, I don't kind of completely buy into that argument, but there is no way I'm saying that artists shouldn't be compensated if these companies are training their data on these open source data, so obviously I'm not saying that, but yes, I mean, somehow as a creative person, I feel that everything that we build on has been inspired by something else. Now, you are a neuroscientist, obviously your brain is doing something extremely different compared to these LLMs, which is like loads and loads and billions and billions of parameters of data. What do you think could take us to that true artificial intelligence? Because, a 3-pound brain is obviously, it does not need these huge amount of data, but it's doing some insane computation. And besides that intelligence, there's also that consciousness, which I think, nobody has a clue about that. So as a neuroscientist, what's your intuition of getting to an artificial intelligence? Do we need a new architecture which is brain inspired? What do you think could be the pathway to get to AGI?
Yeah. Well, can I first address that the plagiarism issue and the creative inspiration, and then get to that, because that's a much longer conversation. So you're right. There's an absolute fuzzy line between inspiration and just like either iterating or repackaging in a new way that humans do all the time. And then, that between that and plagiarism. And then where does the AI fall within that? Is it closer to the plagiarism or closer to the inspiration? And from my perspective right now, it's much closer to the plagiarism side. But there's probably some places where you could say like, oh, well, this is not plagiarism. It's absolutely fine that the AI does this. But it's hard to tell because the AI isn't citing its sources. So one thing that LLMs do very well is create a synopsis of what they see. But it doesn't include the citations to go deeper. It doesn't include like very strong analyses of what it's seen. It just kind of throws out some rather superficial, bland things sometimes. And so if we allow too much of that without the rigor of, the journalistic rigor of citing sources, vetting where the information comes from, and then doing a real analysis of that information, we're going to have a pile of garbage literature on the internet. And I think that's dangerous. I want to be able to have, if people are going to use LLMs, use it to inspire creativity, and then they actually go through and do the work, not this is the end of it. Wait, like I wrote an LLM article, I'm going to throw it on the internet.
No, fair enough. I think those companies are to be blamed who are like scraping, crawling the net. Yeah, no, fair enough. Yes. So your thoughts on like what are we missing, to get to AGI?
Yeah, that's a complicated answer because obviously nobody knows exactly what we're missing, or else we'd have it already probably. But from my perspective, I think there's kind of two approaches that could help. One is just simply a cognitive approach. We know quite a bit about how humans process language, how we develop language, for instance, because you can see the words developing as a toddler goes from making babbles to, being fully fluent in a language. You can see how that develops in certain ways. You don't get all of the information because you're obviously not viewing what the brain is doing inside, but you have some superficial knowledge. You can also look at not just humans, but other animals that have these primitives of language. Even monkeys have many different calls and that mean very specific things. And there is some evidence that you can train certain aspects of language to dolphins and chimps and birds. There's some parts of that. So maybe you can see the basics of language, at least, in how it develops from an outside perspective, and be able to mimic some of those capabilities of what types of language form first and most easily, and then build upon concepts and abstract knowledge and all these things that we do. So that's one approach, and that's approach of a company I'm working with called Aigo. And I think that works very well for languages, to be able to say at a high level, here's things that humans do with language. Let's build a computer system that can do this, and this will give us one form of artificial general intelligence, right? On the other side, there's a lot more to intelligence than that, in my opinion. From maybe it's the exact same way that you would develop language that you would develop a self-driving car for those concepts and everything. But I think you can start at a different place for an embodied AI. You can start with very simple organisms and see how those work, because humans are complicated. There's a lot of things that we do. We have a lot of brain cells, and we're not very keen on letting people peel away the layers to see what's going on in our brains while we're working on them ourselves, right? So you can look at very simple organisms, on the other hand, and get a lot more detail in what's going on in their brains when there's behavior and learning and just their daily life. And so since we do share, an evolutionary background with these organisms, there are the very basic principles of intelligence found in simpler organisms. So if you take a bottom-up approach, go from molecular networks to cellular networks to then systems, you can kind of have two approaches. You can have the bottom-up approach and then the cognitive approach, and see how those line up. And so that's what I've been doing, is trying to understand both how very basic organisms work in learning and memory, and then how humans learn language.
Thank you, Gunnar, for sharing your approach on building artificial general intelligence. Both of the approach sounds very, very interesting. Your bottom-up approach that you kind of mentioned, I think neuroscientists have been doing that since the longest time, learning from basic organisms. There's this connectome project where scientists have kind of worked towards understanding the connectomics, the entire brain circuit, structural and functional capabilities of these simple organisms, starting from C. elegans worm, which has got somewhere around just 302 odd neurons, and then they moved on to a fruit fly, and they're moving on to a mouse at this point in time. And recently, I just read that Google, in partnership with Harvard, has mapped a cubic millimeter of the human brain by combining brain imaging with AI-based processing and analysis to create the most detailed ever map of the human brain. What are your thoughts on this new insight? Do you think that this understanding of the human cubic millimeter of the human brain would help us in understanding the brain better, and would that lead us towards the goal of achieving artificial general intelligence?
I think so, but I think there's things that need to happen first. Because a human brain is highly connected outside of that millimeter, that cubic millimeter, right? And so we're missing some of the detail on the connectivity from this one little aspect of the brain. But then you're also missing the functional part of it, because there's a lot of different ways that a single connectome could function. And if we don't get that information in real time of of relating it to behavior, I think we're going to miss some very important principles there, because it's just too much going on to be able to understand from connectome alone how a system would actually work. It'd be like having a ball of wires and just saying like, okay, how does this computer work? So it's a really tough call. You need to have something that's connected to behavior in my mind. And so that's one of the components that's missing. I think one of the things that's really held us up actually is a misinterpretation actually of how the behavior comes out of the brain. And I'll give you a very specific example. The idea of reinforcement learning, I think, is quite backwards to the way it really happens in real life. And I know this is going to sound completely like off the wall and out in left field here. But if you look at the reinforcement models in computers, they're all built to optimize something, right? So you have a ton of data and then a ton of trials, and it optimizes to this very specific end result that you're looking for. In real life, that doesn't happen. Like we don't really get the ability or the chance even in real life to optimize that to that degree. And so I don't think the giving a reward or giving a punishment after a behavior really works that way, or else we would see a very different outcome in humans. Humans, when they get really good at something, they don't necessarily become more focused on a specific outcome. They become masters of flexibility. So for music, a master pianist doesn't play Bach exactly the same way every time. They can play Bach upside down, backwards, like in the theme of Mozart, in, let's put a little flair of Chopin in there, and all this stuff that you wouldn't. It's really hard for a computer to get to using a reinforcement algorithm, right? So it's kind of the opposite.
That's quite counterintuitive compared to what's going around currently, in the world of AI, because I think anything and everything when it comes to AI is like great work is using the underlying model of reinforcement learning, right from your self-driving cars to robotics to games, simulations, and so on and so forth. What are who are the leaders that you follow, who have this approach, because through ages, you've seen that, obviously, there's this big team who have got like a certain approach and that the world kind of follows that. And then there are these, like small number of like very brave thinkers who go against the norm. And while the world is zigging, they are zagging. But somehow I think, this counterintuitive approach kind of always leads them towards the awesomeness. So would love to know who you kind of follow and who are the peers who you look up to, who are building cool things in the world of AI.
I tend to not necessarily look at individuals, but look at the type of research that's coming out all over the place and see where you get a different outcome from what you expected. Like if the theory says this and the experiment turned out completely differently, then there's something interesting going on there, especially if it's very easily repeatable, right? So the way I've looked at it isn't necessarily from specific inspiration from specific people, although there are inspiring scientists like even Craig Venter, who did the Human Genome Project, and he was kind of a rebel himself, right? I look to that kind of inspiration, but more on the scientific side, I'm looking across all sorts of different experiments to say, okay, where's the stuff that didn't fit the theory? Because I think that's really what's telling us how the human brain is working.
Right. So Gunnar, there is obviously the entire world, some of the brightest minds who are going behind this problem, creating artificial general intelligence. Great. Because even with the narrow artificial intelligence, we've got great things happening, because it's kind of democratized technology, because anybody and everybody is become a technologist. You don't really need to have hands-on learning with code. You can just put in some prompts and you can do coding and stuff like that. So I think it's obviously going to completely upend society and take us into great things. But do you also think about the downsides of building another species of sorts, a species which has its own understanding of the world, its own interpretation of the world, its own maybe thoughts? Do you also, think about AI safety? Do you have on thoughts of once we build this thing, if this agent that we're building, which is possibly general intelligence and it can surpass entire human intelligence, could it create its own goals that we don't understand? Do you think about something like that? And does it kind of, as a neuroscientist who's kind of working on AGI, do you have, thoughts on how do you kind of mitigate these problems?
Yeah, I think about it, but I think there's something much more nefarious that's here already. And that's the fact that with the technology we've built so far, which has this optimization algorithm, I think that the much more dangerous thing is deep fakes and manipulating humans into thinking that something about the world that's different from what it really is, and using that to control us. And that's already here. Right. And that's we're very easily manipulated by stuff that goes along with our party line or our already biases. And if we see a lot of this, we stop thinking about the way the world really is, and we start reacting and being angry about stuff. And we've seen it already with, there was some with the US elections last time, there was some manipulation of the elections through deep fake type of technology. And it wasn't even that sophisticated. It was just giving us things that we already thought a little bit and just pushing the boundary just a little bit more. And so I think first we need to be very cognizant of what our current AI abilities are capable of with manipulating humans. Then secondly, it'll be about AGI manipulating humans. But so one thing that I've done that actually I think mitigates that a little bit on the AGI side is that I don't have any optimization algorithms in anything that I've built. So I've completely removed reinforcement learning. So the goals that you give them are very much more, written into the code or written into the behavior systems themselves, rather than optimize this any way you feel like and see what happens, right? And the outcome could be like, well, the best approach is to, kill all humans with that approach. But if you give them a whole bunch of goals, and one of their goals is protect humans, and then another goal to balance is protect natural resources, and another goal to balance is something else that's positive, like protect social integrity, things like that, then you get a system that tries to balance rather than optimize for a specific thing.
So interesting. So you're saying reinforcement learning model is possibly not the right approach. The best approach is hard code it right from the beginning. So you have the do's and do nots programmed. So you nudge the model to do the right thing rather than the wrong things. Because these reinforcement learning models, if it's not carefully designed, it could lead the model down a path that benefits its own goals and end up possibly harming humans, and that. So yes, I think, we need to be very careful in building these AGIs, because yes, we are all on a race in towards, to building these machines which are more capable. But I think, we need to kind of come together, because, it clearly looks like that we really don't have a clear understanding of what could be the right approach. There's a lot of these thoughts of what could be the approach, but I think we need to carefully understand what could be the output if we don't really carefully build this, because for the first time we are creating these models which are self-learning, and it could end up being a different species altogether, and we don't want a terminator. Would love to understand your thoughts on the future of jobs, because even today, these current large language models are disrupting humanity, and it's not just the businesses, even the creative industries, the businesses, there are models that do coding and so on and so forth. In the creative industry, we've these models which does music, which does images, designs, 3D. So we are breaching the space which was what was only humans, what humans could do. So maybe share your thoughts on the what the future of job is going to look like with these accelerating AI models, and also maybe the thought about the militarization of AI, because that is something which I kind of worry about.
Eventually, the job automation is going to completely change our economies, the world economies, right? It's just a matter of how quickly that gets there, because every other new technology has done that to us at some point, and it's always hurt the poor. And then there's been some uprising that's occurred because of it, and people that are being replaced by jobs, they're not just going to find something else to do. Like, what if you've been a factory worker for 30 years and you have 20 more to go or 10 more to go? What are you going to do at this point? You're not going to just find a desk job in a computer lab or something. Like, that's a complete upheaval of a certain segment of society. So that's troublesome. And then back to the military concept, I think the most dangerous part of that is if you take the humans out of the loop, because we're always going to be developing these very dangerous weapons and warfare technologies, whether you use AI or something else to do it. But if you allow AI to kill humans on its own, it's kind of like no telling what you're going to get at that point. And so I think it's going to be scary in the fact that how much control are we going to give AI to do our warfare? And are we going to stop even thinking about it and just let an AI, warship go and attack another country? That's kind of worrisome. But one way that I think you can mitigate that kind of thing is to have diversity in your AI board and in your AI development, so that you make sure that you're getting a viewpoint at least from every type of person that would be affected by the AI. And that's not happening effectively at all now, right? So I think there was just an article about Meta's AI safety board, and all of them are white male, every single one of them. And so that's a very biased perspective, right? And you can see that in the way that the biases appear in the models, in the training, all of that. And so if we allow it to keep continuing on this journey of having one type of perspective, the world is not going to be it's not going to be better with AI unless we get those other perspectives in the room.
Right. Yeah, I really hope that kind of changes. Then I hope that we have people across the world being part of this conversation on how do we kind of, think about this new species of sorts that we are kind of creating in a society with advanced AGI. What would define a meaningful human life?
Yeah, that's something I am very interested in. So the way that I have been trying to approach it is, if you develop an AGI, can it bring people together rather than just take jobs? Think about like loneliness right now. It's at a record high across the world. loneliness, depression, all of these things that come from social isolation. So what would be best for our technology is to be able to have a technology be a social nucleation site to get people out of their isolated environments and back into the social world that we as a species developed in. And so can AI companions help you come out of your shell and back into a social world? Can a robot in a nursing home not just help you, but help you interface with your peers that are in the same world as you? Can you get generations to talk to each other, like the children and the grandparents that have been separated? Can we have some technology in the middle that can help merge that again? I think that's what would really be successful.
Right. Gunnar, what are your thoughts on AGI? Because I mean, would it be able to kind of create some things from like, first principles thinking, because we have like huge gaping problems, I mean, that we need to solve, right from world hunger to your mathematics problems to physics, dark matter to kind of understanding, are we like actually alone in this universe? Are there like, I mean, others? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You think that, I mean, this artificial general intelligence, what we think of, would be able to kind of, help us with these like deep problems?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can develop a system that can learn anything, then any problem is up for grabs for that AI. But if you look at it from a monetary standpoint, depression actually costs the world more than any other ailment. And it's because people who are depressed are not effective in the workforce. They're not out there contributing to society. They're having drugs and stuff that costs money, and then this can last for decades for some people, right? And it happens at all ages. Well, where Alzheimer's is more of a an old person problem. So I think we should try to focus efforts on, if we build an AGI, what kinds of problems can we give it first? And, from my perspective, one of them is social contact. Can we get AGI to help us reinvigorate a social network, not just in our own little tribes, but across the globe, to get us to work together to solve all these problems as a society, as a world society? Is that possible? I would hope so.
So, once we have these AGI, I'll be able to unlock the secrets of the universe. What are, I mean, you currently working on? Is there something that you would want to kind of share with our audience? You mentioned that you're part of not just ORBAI, but also Aigo. Is there any updates or something that you're working on which you think you can share with the audience?
Yeah. So a couple of things that are kind of in stealth mode still. But yeah, some of the work I've been doing with Aigo, they've been around a long time doing call center chatbots, and they already have a very effective product for 1-800-Flowers. But now they're starting to develop a real artificial general intelligence system based on language. And so I've started helping them with the training and the approach of like how do you actually train a general intelligence system with language alone. And I think that's going to be a very interesting approach, but it's very early still on the general intelligence side. And then what I've been doing in the background on my own, which is still in stealth, is about developing, cute robot companions. And this is more along the lines of like entertainment and social networks. So I'm working there to have, a toy be able to learn in real time and interact as an animal would. So a robotic pet, so to speak. And hopefully that can build up to be more of a real social companion and get to the R2-D2s of sci-fi and things like that. So that again is in stealth still, but I was just going to mention that I've been working on that.
Could you kind of give us a little bit more background on this robotic companion that you were talking about? What's the timelines that you're looking at, kind of developing this and taking it from, from your workshop to the market?
Yeah, I think the first one, if this works out effectively, it would be a very basic toy system, not a true companion like you would think of like R2-D2 from the movies, but more of just a pet toy. And that would be to market probably about a year and a half, a little less, hopefully, because there's a lot of design to go on the physical side with a robot as well.
Could you kind of give us a little details on the hardware as well as the software bit of this robotic companion that you're talking about?
Yeah, what's interesting about the difference between animals and humans and robots is that animals and humans have a ton of actuators and sensors. Everything is a sensor in your body, right? Every cell. Robots have a couple sensors and like wheels or legs and arms for their actuators, and that's about it. Where we have muscle systems and do all sorts of complicated things. So I'm trying to figure out how to get as many sensors as possible with simple actuators to have this robot be as aware as possible without running up the expense too far. So that's the kind of challenge there is how do you get it aware of everything that goes on in its world and still have it be, an affordable product. And so one way is just having, wheels and cameras and, microphones around, but even those kind of things, run up the cost significantly.
Right. Interesting. Because, there are these companies already building these robo dogs and having a pet companion, a social companion. I think they'll be so really cool. And I think that would be like a great place to start from because, some of the largest companies, like Boston Dynamics have been working on, these embodied intelligence, and it has its own problems. But yes, I think it's the growth has been exponential, and we going from humanly controlled robots to possibly semi-autonomous robots. What are your intuitions on the timelines of artificial general intelligence? It's obviously it's a very, very hazy question, but I mean, do you have like a rough idea? Because there are people such as Ray Kurzweil who've been predicting from the longest time that by 2029 or 2045 we should be having artificial intelligence and beyond. What are your intuition on that? When do you think we should have artificial general intelligence?
Well, so that my perspective on it is that the current approaches, the mainstream approaches, cannot be stepped up to get to artificial general intelligence. So artificial general intelligence is going to come from left field somewhere. It's going to come from a different approach, and it's going to come out of nowhere. And so I think all these people are trying to put a timeline on that are missing the point that a technology like deep learning cannot be built upon to get general intelligence. It's a small tool in a toolkit, but the underlying engine has to be something different. So you're asking me a guess on when a new technology will appear out of nowhere and then drive to AGI. And so there's a lot of new people working on this. So I think that new technology could come in this decade, but how long until it's actually a general intelligence system, that's harder to say. I'd say somewhere between a decade or more is probably true.
Gunnar, really, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Will be great if you could leave us behind with your moonshot. What's the problem that you're going out? Obviously, you're going behind AGI, but there is something else. I mean, please, would be great to understand and paint a picture of the world that would, the world that we would get into once we have artificial general intelligence.
So my moonshot is instilling emotional systems into robots. And the reason for that is the social connection. right? We would want that to be developing a real social connection with a robot. If it doesn't have its own emotional systems, I don't think we'll develop a deep connection with them. Now, if that happens, that's going to it could be wild, right? It could be very positive, where you suddenly have a new brand of friend that's there, or it could be, pretty negative, where that takes away from real human interaction. And so what I'm hoping for is that that kind of connection with machines goes and helps us come out of the closet into understanding ourselves better and understanding the likenesses that we have amongst the peoples of the world. And that can help bring us together rather than drive us apart with war. That's what I'm hoping.
Right. Gunnar, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. I hope we get into a world where we create a system which emotionally connects with us, and in a way that we kind of coexist, because so far, what you've been seeing is that slowly and steadily these systems are possibly maybe working towards a space where they could replace human workforce, and that will definitely not pan out nice for the entire human race. So I hope that we kind of build this next, general intelligence which connects with us and maybe coexist. In that note, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. To my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye-bye. Thank you, Gunnar. Really appreciate this.
Hey, thank you. This was very interesting. I love the discussion.